All right, members, we're passing out the spreadsheets of the bills that we're going to hear in the order that we're going to hear them with the pages, so everybody can kind of keep track of where we are. What I want to do first is just to thank all the Ways and Means committee members for the long hours and testimony that they endured. I appreciate the effort. We took a lot of tough votes to get us to this point today, to where I think we're at least in a place where we're able to present some options on how to solve the problem of the cuts to higher ed and health care. If I could, for a minute, for the benefit of the public and those that didn't serve on Ways and Means, I think it's important for everybody to remember what it is we do as it relates to the budget and as it relates to the revenue that we have to budget. Our fiscal office provides us with a forecast of what the amount of money they think we're going to have. And they do their best job, but as you might imagine, it's an impossible task to get accurate. Sometimes they forecast a little bit more than what we end up with. Sometimes it's a little bit less. But regardless of that, the number that we get, that's the pot of money that we have to give to the Appropriations Committee to determine how we're going to spend that money, how we're going to invest that money. And so we now know what that number is. And we then have to decide, where are we going to invest that money? Are we going to invest it and continue the tax incentives at the level that they currently exist at? Are we going to invest it in higher ed? Or are we going to invest it in healthcare? Or are we going to spread it out and give everybody a little bit? That's ultimately what we have to decide. Over the last few weeks, and again, I'm sure we'll hear it today, the phrase, we support higher ed, but we know that emergency rooms have been closing, but we know that the medical school is turning down 80 to 100 qualified applicants that can provide doctors in areas of the state that need it. But I'm going to finish the sentence. But continue to give us that money instead. That's the argument that's being made today. And that's the decision we're faced with. Sometime during the process, the business community, who I've handled bills for the last decade, said these instruments on the floor today are real bullets, suggesting, of course, that passage of these instruments would kill business. Well, I'm here to say higher ed is asking for a stay of execution. We're well beyond bullets in a gun. And let's be very honest when we're talking about what these bills do. We are not eliminating any of these incentives. There's not one incentive that is being eliminated. We're saying we're going to scale back the amount of money that we provide to you in the form of incentives. Maybe it's 20%, maybe it's one of the 4 pennies, which is 25%. But we're not eliminating any of the incentives, because I believed when I passed those bills, when I voted for them, or even when I handled them on the floor, that those incentives were smart things to do. And I don't think we should get rid of them. But when we're faced with what we're faced with, when higher ed is faced with the cuts that they're faced with, when the healthcare community is faced with what they're faced with, I then have to reflect and say, I was part of the reason these incentives exist, and I can stand here and try to protect them and say that they were right, and there's no reason to tinker with them at all, or I can be honest and say, we need to look at them again. I'm not asking anybody on the floor in here today to vote for any part of these bills. All I can ask of you guys is to put aside whatever political pressures, whatever political goals, whatever politics, whatever role politics is playing in your decision. I'm asking you to put that aside and say, I'm going to vote for what's in the best interest of the state of Louisiana. And if that means keeping the incentives exactly where they are and gutting higher ed, and that's how you feel, then by all means make that vote. I think I'm making it abundantly clear where I stand. The last thing that I want to say is, we give these incentives because we want businesses that are looking to move to Louisiana reason to move here. And I don't think businesses move here based on incentives alone. I don't think there's any business, and I would challenge you to find one for me that says, well, they've gutted higher ed and it's really in shambles and it looks like they're going to close some universities and they don't prioritize education, but they're going to film the next Transformers movie there. I don't think there's any business that says higher ed, healthcare is closing emergency rooms, but man, I can get some really cheap smokes in Louisiana. I don't think there's any business, and I could go on, that's moving here solely on these incentives and what we have presented out of Ways and Means Committee for you to consider today. It's a package deal, but there's no greater incentive to businesses that are considering moving here than having an excellent higher education system, having an excellent healthcare system, and providing the infrastructure and roads that we need to make this state grow the way it needs to grow. I said lastly before, but I'm going to go one more time. I don't want anyone in here to be able to go home and say we did not have a choice. We had to cut higher ed. We had to cut health care. We didn't have a choice. Today, we're giving you a choice, and it's a choice everyone in here is free to make. You're either voting to trim the incentives to adequately fund health care and higher ed, or you're voting to keep those incentives in place and have Mr. Fannin and the Appropriations Committee make the cuts that are going to need to be made. I'd say thank everybody for their attention, vote your conscience, and I feel like the state will be in good hands. Thank you.